So far, Narad Muni had given two allegorical stories, um, or presented two allegorical stories in front of Maharaj Prācīnabarhi, and Prācīnabarhi experiences transformation as a result of Narada's powerful words, and therefore Maharaj Prācīnabarhi expresses his realization that his previous teachers had instructed him to perform ritualistic Vedic activities and to seek temporary pleasures like looking for the heavenly bliss and so on and so forth. However, Narada's instructions, they were on a completely different platform. They were fully spiritual and they are based on the living entity's eternal identity in relation to Krishna. And therefore, Maharaj Prācīnabarhi says that that my dear Brahmana, whatever you have said, I have heard with great attention. And considering all of it, I've come to the conclusion that the acharyas or teachers who engaged me in fruitive activity did not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me? And then Srila Prabhupada in the purport to 56th verse is pointing out that actually the so-called teachers or leaders of material society do not really know the goal of life. I mean, this reality that Prācīnabarhi is expressing, and almost coming from the heart filled with gratitude that finally my eyes are open. Likewise, we should also feel grateful to have contacted the members of the disciplic succession, because of which now we know things as they are. And all the teachers who have played role in our life, in our development in so many different ways, but they did not touch the spirit of the real goal of life. And exactly the same situation is expressed so wonderfully by King Prācīnabarhi. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out in this purport that they are described in the Bhagavad Gita as Maya Aprita Jnana. They appear to be very learned scholars, but actually the influence of the illusory energy has taken away their knowledge. So what is the real knowledge? Real knowledge means searching out Krishna. Vedeshya sarver ahamev vedya. All Vedic knowledge is meant for searching out Krishna, because Krishna is the origin of everything. Janmadyasya yataha. In Bhagavad Gita 10.2, Krishna says, Aham adirhi devanam. I am the source of the demigods. Thus, Krishna is the origin and beginning of all demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all others. The Vedic ritualistic ceremonies are concerned with satisfying different demigods. But unless one is very advanced, he cannot understand that the original personality is Sri Krishna. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. After hearing the instructions of Nārada, King Barishman came to his senses. The real goal of life is to attain devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The king therefore decided to reject the so-called priestly orders that simply engage their followers in ritualistic ceremonies without giving effective instructions about the goal of life. And then Srila Prabhupada continues on to say that at the present moment, the churches, temples, and mosques all over the world are not attracting people because foolish priests cannot elevate their followers to the platform of knowledge. Not being aware of the real goal of life, they simply keep their congregations in ignorance. Consequently, those who are well educated have become uninterested in the ritualistic ceremonies. At the same time, they are not benefited with real knowledge. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore very important for the enlightenment of all classes. And then King Prācīnabarhi is pointing out very openly that there are contradictions between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers who engage me in fruitive activities. And we also see that when we come in contact with spiritual knowledge, we also start finding contradictions with respect to the education system that we have been indoctrinated into. But King Prācīnabarhi is able to make that distinction, that I now can understand the distinction between devotional service, knowledge, and renunciation. And this is what also happens, like when we contact the members of other spiritual groups, or those who have been also leading a pious life, but they may not necessarily see Krishna consciousness movement at the highest level, because they are already sort of conditioned to their own sort of practices, and not really seeing the difference that is there in terms of the articulation of the goal of life. And then Maharaj Prācīnabarhi is saying that I had some doubts about them, but you have now very kindly dissipated all these doubts. So this is called a heart full of gratitude, acknowledging that yes, because of your presence, I am now evolved in my understanding. I can now understand how even the great sages are bewildered by the real purpose of life. Of course, there is no question of sense gratification. So Srila Prabhupada in the 57th purport is writing that in devotional service, there is no sense gratification, but only transcendental loving service to the Lord. Consequently, the so-called priests engaged in sense gratification do not very much like devotional service. The Brahmanas, the priests, have been against this Krishna consciousness movement since it began with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started this movement, the priestly class lodged complaints to the Qazi, the magistrate of the Mohammedan government. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to lead a civil disobedience movement against the propaganda of the so-called followers of Vedic principles. These people are described as karma jada smartas, which indicates that they are priests engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. It is here stated that such people become bewildered. To save oneself from the hands of these karma jada smartas, one should strictly follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is to abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. This is the pinnacle point of the Bhagavad Gita. And then King Prācīnabarhi comes to state a very important question. And what is the question? This question concerns the process of transmigration. That the results of whatever a living entity does in this life are enjoyed in the next life. And yet, the body that is used as an instrument in the performance of these various ritualistic sacrifices, or any activities for that matter, is already dead. So how can one enjoy or suffer reactions for work done by a body that no longer exists? So that's what he is asking, that how is it possible to enjoy or suffer the reactions of that work in a different body? So this now propels Nārada Muni to give a detailed exposition on the signs of the soul. So this section, these 10 verses in this section, they are sort of, in one sense, a more detailed version of the Sankhya Yoga section of the Bhagavad Gita. There are certain details which are presented here which are not presented in the Bhagavad Gita, in the section concerning the difference between the body and the soul. So Nārada Muni begins like this, that the living entity acts in a gross body in this life. This body is forced to act by the subtle body composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. After the gross body is lost, the subtle body is still there to enjoy or suffer. Thus, there is no change. So most of the time when we are presenting the philosophy of the soul, we are actually deriving the full picture from this section. Because in the Bhagavad Gita second chapter, Krishna mainly distinguishes between the body and the soul But this clear distinction about the subtle body going on to the next body with the soul, that is more clearly expressed in this particular section. Because it is the soul that actually gives life to the gross body, and the ethereal wrapping around the soul proper is the subtle body, and that is composed of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. And it is through the subtle body that the soul acts in the gross body. When the soul leaves the gross body, the body dies, but the soul remains wrapped up in the subtle body. And therefore, karma is carried in the subtle body, and as the soul transfers to a new body, along with the soul body, along with the soul's subtle body and karma, the living entity feels a sense of continuity in the next life. And to illustrate this, 61st verse gives an analogy. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. It's interesting. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or a demigod's body on this planet or on another planet. So you can see the comprehensiveness with which Narad Muni is presenting this. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. So Srila Prabhupada summarizes the process of transmigration, liberation, and elevation to Krishna consciousness in this particular purport, the 61st purport. The conclusion is that the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego creates an atmosphere with desires and ambitions that the living entity enjoys in the subtle body. Actually, the living entity is in the subtle body, even though the gross body apparently changes, and even though he inhabits the gross body on various planets. All the activities performed by the living entity in the subtle body are called illusory because they are not permanent. Liberation means getting out of the clutches of the subtle body. So death is the separation from the gross body. Liberation means separation from the subtle body. If we train the subtle body in this life by always thinking about Krishna, we will transfer to Krishna Loka after leaving the gross body. And this is what we want to practice, the art of Krishna consciousness, because that is to essentially engage the subtle body in Krishna's service. And that's what we are going to sort of learn in this section. So we'll continue. So this section will be sort of concluded tomorrow, and we will see how Narad Muni brings out the detail in this section. Thank you very much.